It's 10 o'clock. This is Sky News at 10. Our top story. The New Year's Eve fireworks display in London will go ahead in 2 hours' time, despite severe weather warnings affecting much of the UK.
And this city is promising the biggest and best fireworks they've ever seen. The weather is fine, the crowds are here, the countdown is on.
Cities around the world have been marking the beginning of 2025, with Sydney among the first to celebrate the new year. Bad weather has impacted New Year celebrations in other parts of the UK, with heavy rain and strong winds leading to widespread disruption. Also tonight, people are urged to drink in moderation during New Year's Eve celebrations to ease pressure on stretched ambulance crews. The UN says Israel's deliberate destruction of healthcare facilities in Gaza could amount to a war crime. Plus, tributes to the veteran broadcaster Johnny Walker, who's died at the age of 79. And we'll take a first look at tomorrow's front pages in our press preview from 10:30. A very good evening. Thanks for joining us. Tonight's New Year's Eve fireworks display in London will go ahead on the banks of the Thames, despite other events around the country being cancelled because of heavy rain and strong winds. There's already been a spectacular start to the new year across the world, with stunning firework displays in Sydney, Hong Kong and Dubai to see in 2025. Well, London Mayor Sadiq Khan confirmed this evening that Europe's largest fireworks display would go ahead in the capital, despite the severe weather warnings that remain in place for much of the country. More than 100,000 people are expected to attend, with crowds already gathering on the embankment. There for us is our national correspondent, Tom Parminter. So, Tom, it's all systems go.
Yeah, there was a lot of concern given what had happened in Edinburgh with the cancellation of the world-renowned Hogmanay celebrations because of the high winds, other disruption to other events in different parts of the UK. But here in the capital tonight, the weather is pretty good. A light breeze, and that means that all the checking and the final preparations for what they're promising will be the biggest fireworks, the best fireworks they've ever laid on. Well, all of that has now got the green light. It is happening. The crowds are lining the embankment here, trying to get the best spot, the best vantage point to see the night sky in the capital city here light up on the stroke of midnight. The London Eye behind us will, of course, be the traditional centrepiece of that display that is planned from July in the middle of the year right through until now. The final checks being made on the display that will see around 12,000 fireworks let off in a 12-minute burst of a spectacular welcome to the new year. Of course, we've seen Sydney, we've seen Auckland, we've seen Bangkok, Dubai, other European cities about to get their moments. And in a little under 2 hours' time, it will be the sky of London. And, of course, celebrations perhaps more mooted due to the weather conditions in other parts of the UK, but the centre of that national celebration is here on the banks of the Thames. Everyone is ready. A big international crowd, lots of tourists, lots of people who've travelled into London for this moment. And the countdown is very much on now, with the Mayor of London saying that this is going to be a display with plenty of surprises locked in it. So we don't know what they will be at this stage, but a lot of anticipation in the air as the final hours are counted down now.
Yeah, looking forward to it. We'll return to you a little later as those minutes tick down. Well, other major cities around the world have already been marking the start of 2025, of course. Robbie Williams led the celebrations in Sydney, holding a concert to coincide with the fireworks display on the harbour. But this year, Australia was given a run for its money by both Hong Kong and Dubai, which held equally spectacular displays. Sky's Emma Birchley has been watching as the world welcomed in the new year.
Auckland's skyline exploded in colour as New Zealand welcomed in the new year, 13 hours ahead of the UK.
3, 2, 1, Happy New Year!
But for a spectacular senses overload, Sydney 2 hours later was the place to be. More than 1 million people witnessed the breathtaking display, with fireworks lighting up the sky in every direction. A curtain of golden light raining down from the Harbour Bridge, one of many highlights of an evening that started with a warm-up by none other than Robbie Williams. Across Japan, it was a more muted approach, with the traditional bell ringing here in Tokyo to mark the passing of the old year and the arrival of the new. But elsewhere in East Asia, 2025 was welcomed with a bang. In Taiwan's capital, Taipei, they'd waited hours to ensure the best view and weren't disappointed. There were fireworks too in Hong Kong, the pyrotechnics illuminating Victoria Harbour, while China's capital, Beijing, staged a ceremony to greet the new year. Soon after, the celebrations began in Thailand's Bangkok, with a neon flotilla setting the scene, before the night sky burst into an explosion of light. In the United Arab Emirates, Dubai's Burj Khalifa, the world's tallest building, radiated high above the city as an impressive display of 1,000 carefully coordinated drones filled the sky. And a chain of floating fireworks was set off in Ras Al Khaimah. While all of this was happening, on the other side of the world, a whole day lay ahead before it would be their turn to celebrate. Emma Birchley, Sky News.
Well, back here, bad weather has led to the cancellation of a number of New Year's Eve events, including those in Newcastle and on the Isle of Wight. In Edinburgh, business leaders have criticised the decision to cancel the outdoor Hogmanay event because of fears over public safety. From Edinburgh, here's our Scotland correspondent, Conor Gillis.
It was over before it even began. One of the world's biggest New Year's Eve outdoor parties cancelled. Edinburgh's famous Hogmanay celebrations, a casualty of the weather. 50,000 people were expected here to mark the moment and enjoy the show.
I'd been blown over by the wind when we arrived and been at the hospital twice, so it's not been it's not been perfect, never mind.
So you're heading home now then?
We are.
I come from Barcelona, and we thought that here in Edinburgh there was a very big celebration and big party, and then we come here and it turns out it's cancelled. They cancelled even the fireworks, so now it's difficult for us to know what we're going to do.
What do you make then of the fact the Edinburgh Hogmanay is cancelled?
What?
Is it?
I don't think so.
The outdoor street party's cancelled.
I was looking forward to it, so I don't think so. It's cancelled.
We came to Edinburgh because of that.
Cancelling events on this scale are a headache and clearly come at a cost. The last time Hogmanay organisers had to call it off was almost 20 years ago. COVID aside, the last-minute nature of this has left many businesses counting the cost.
This time of year contributes hugely to the Scottish economy and the local Edinburgh economy. I think estimates of close to £50 million. So clearly there will have to be detailed investigations about the preparations that were in place.
A decision defended by organisers who are hoping insurers will pay out.
We've got to make sure that we keep audiences safe and our team safe, and the winds were just too strong to make sure that we could get the infrastructure up to make sure that that was the case.
Grim and dangerous elsewhere too. This the scene in the Highlands, leaving some trains unable to run. The final day of the year blanketed by weather warnings, like here in the Lake District, where the ferries were affected and the brave battled the elements.
British and we brave it, don't we? Do what we've got to do.
It's grim, isn't it?
Yeah. We're here for 3 days anyway, so just make the most of it.
It's a bit grim. We've come up with the dog to walk all through the fields and over the top, and it's flooded, so we had to turn back and come here. So we're going to have to go to the pub now and sit in the pub all afternoon.
A similar story in Scarborough, where flood warnings had a community on alert. And here in Blackpool, the fireworks display was cancelled over safety fears, conditions creating difficulties. A story of disappointment as 2024 comes to a bleak and damp end. Connor Gillis, Sky News.
Let's just take you live once again to central London, where the build-up is well underway as we count down the minutes to midnight. And a reminder that we will have full coverage of tonight's New Year's Eve celebrations across the UK from 11 o'clock here on Sky News, with the London fireworks live, of course, after the bombs at midnight. And people are being urged to drink moderately during tonight's New Year's Eve celebrations, and only phone 999 in an emergency to help ease the pressure on stretched ambulance staff. The Welsh Ambulance Service and Walsall Healthcare Trust have both declared critical incidents as they struggle to cope with demand. This report from Alice Porter.
It's one of the biggest nights of the year for partygoers, but a busy night could be disastrous for our struggling NHS. In the last 24 hours, Walsall NHS Healthcare Trust in the West Midlands and Welsh Ambulance Service have declared critical incidents the highest alert level.
We've seen more delays occurring at the emergency department because of that pressure through the urgent and emergency care pathway. That results in delays for ambulances handing over at hospitals, at the emergency departments, means we can't respond in the community.
Hospitals across the UK are struggling with rising cases of flu, COVID, norovirus and respiratory syncytial virus, which exacerbate underlying health conditions in our ageing population. NHS National Medical Director Professor Sir Stephen Powis said, "The winter flu season has not only hit the NHS early this year, but it is potentially on track to be one of the worst we have ever seen, as the quademic continues to increase pressure across services." It's no wonder that some ambulance trusts have urged partygoers to drink moderately tonight, concerned over the potential impact. Speaking to Sky News this week, London Ambulance Service is gearing up for potentially the busiest night of the year.
We've got extra call handlers ready and waiting to pick up calls from patients across London. We've also got about 200 extra staff out there on the roads, which is about 50 extra ambulances.
While NHS trusts are trying their best to cope with winter pressures, those in emergency medicine are concerned that the public are losing faith in the service.
We will continue to see these huge waits outside, and this will impact on our patients, because already we're seeing it. Patients lose confidence. I see lots of people who say, "Oh, I was so worried about coming to A&E because I didn't want to have this big wait," that they don't come when they should.
2025 will soon be welcomed in, but as people gathered over the festive period, the peak of seasonal viruses is still to come. Alice Porter, Sky News.
The United Nations says Israeli attacks on and around hospitals in Gaza have pushed the healthcare system there to the brink of total collapse. In a critical report, the UN says it has serious concerns over possible war crimes and crimes against humanity. Dozens of patients have been evacuated from Gaza for treatment, but thousands more remain. The Israeli military says Hamas militants were the targets of a strike on Gaza City's Al-Wafa hospital on Sunday, which the Palestinian Civil Defense Authority said killed 7 people. And the last functioning hospital in northern Gaza, the Kamal Adwan Hospital in Bet Lahia, was also targeted by the Israeli military 3 days ago. Well, a report by the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights describes a pattern in which Israeli forces struck, besieged and forcibly evacuated hospitals, leading to patients dying or being killed. It documents 136 attacks on 27 hospitals and 12 other medical facilities, with casualties including medics and civilians, as well as causing significant damage or complete destruction. It adds the evidence that hospitals have been used by Palestinian armed groups, including Hamas, is vague.
In essence, if the relentless bombing and the dire humanitarian situation in Gaza were not enough, the one sanctuary where Palestinians should have felt safe, in fact, became a death trap. Under certain circumstances, the deliberate destruction of healthcare facilities may amount to a form of collective punishment, which is also a war crime.
Back here, and the veteran broadcaster Johnny Walker has died at the age of 79. The Radio 2 host stepped down due to ill health, presenting his final Sounds of the 70s show in October. Tim Davie, the BBC's Director General, described him as a pop radio pioneer and a champion of great music, entertaining millions of beloved listeners on the BBC across decades. A court in South Korea has issued an arrest warrant for President Yoon Suk-yeol, who has been impeached over his decision to declare martial law earlier this month. He has immunity from criminal prosecution, but it does not extend to allegations of rebellion or treason, for which he's being investigated. Hollywood stars Angelina Jolie and Brad Pitt have reached a divorce settlement 8 years on from their separation. Jolie filed for divorce in 2016, claiming Pitt had been abusive towards her and their children on a private jet flight from Europe. The couple married in 2014 and share 6 children. Police in the West Midlands say they have seized and analysed more than 4,000 phones and computers to help them solve wide-ranging crimes from shoplifting to rape and murder. The force says 95% of the cases they deal with have a connection to the online world. The Sky's Lisa Dowd reports.
It's 4 a.m. These officers are going in to find a suspected Birmingham drug dealer and also her mobile phone.
So if we think that you've got potential to wipe that phone, we're not going to allow that to happen.
A device has been recovered and it could contain crucial evidence, crucial digital evidence. And examining devices like this phone is taking up an increasing amount of resources. This year alone, West Midlands Police has seized and analysed more than 4,000 phones and computers to help them solve anything from shoplifting cases to rapes and murders.
In the past, when we were looking at the old-fashioned sort of Nokia burner type phones, which had a limited amount of data, it's developed. You look at your typical smartphone, you're looking at essentially a mini computer. That holds a lot of personal data, such as the location where those people have been. Look at your iPhones as an example. You'll see that the operating system is updating on a near weekly, monthly basis. So we have to stay abreast of those changes.
95% of cases here now have a connection to the online world. In response, the Digital Forensics Unit at West Midlands Police is expanding.
Most crimes have got some kind of digital footprint, but we've adapted. And if you think about the number of recruits we've taken into the organisation, they're not from my generation. The Generation X, Y, Z, Facebook, millennials, and sometimes inappropriately called snowflakes. But they're absolutely brilliant because they've been brought up with this technology.
So right now I'm doing a triage of a hard drive in a computer.
Amy is one of the new recruits.
We do like a variety of crimes, kidnapping and burglary, robbery, all that kind of stuff. But the main stuff is child abuse, which obviously it can be very hard sometimes because it's not nice seeing them kind of things.
The digital workforce here has increased by 10% and it's likely to be expanded further as forces across the country try to work out where best to spend their limited funding. Lisa Dowd, Sky News, Birmingham.
Now, as 2024 comes to an end, we've been reflecting on what has been a busy year for the royal family, with the King's shock cancer diagnosis a defining moment. Sources close to the palace have told Sky News the kindness of the public has encouraged and emboldened members of the family to open up like never before. Our royal correspondent Rhiannon Mills has been looking back over the year.
It's been a year where they've put themselves out there in ways we have never seen before.
The surgery was successful. However, tests after the operation found cancer had been present.
The country is behind you.
No, because I've had so many wonderful messages and cards, and
I can imagine.
It's reduced me to tears.
A year that should have felt more normal after the change of reign, with the focus on other things. Instead, family has at times had to come before the royal, as we heard from the King himself on Christmas Day.
From a personal point of view, I offer special heartfelt thanks to the selfless doctors and nurses who this year have supported me and other members of my family through the uncertainties and anxieties of illness, and have helped provide the strength, care, and comfort we have needed.
But his openness about it all has been striking, as he still wanted to show us the kind of monarch that he wants to be. Food poverty, the environment and community at the heart of his work, and appreciated by crowds on the King and Queen's last engagement of the year.
I'm hoping that he'll get better and get through it, and it's good that he's fighting back and just carrying on with his normal duties.
Probably humanised him a bit more than make him less aloof than he would have been.
When you're in the public eye like that, you get quite a hard time. So I think being open about things like that is really good. People a bit more understanding and kind.
He gives a lot of people encouragement, because if he can get over it, they can get over it.
When it comes to the Prince and Princess of Wales, I'm told we should see this year as an evolution in the way they want to communicate. Empathetic leadership and impact, the driving force behind their more personal approach. It feels like we've slipped into a new type of reign that most of us could not have imagined, with the royal family being more open about their frailties, partly because of all the understanding from members of the public, as the King and the Princess continue to manage their health concerns with the expectations on them in those high-profile and public roles. But it's been that profile and the global fascination in them that's caused the biggest problems. Social media blowing up with conspiracy theories around Kate earlier in the year, and that Mother's Day photograph that was pulled by picture agencies. Communications experts believe their apparent new openness may in some ways have been forced on them.
We now have an audience that demands more from the royal family through channels that do not have the same level of control that you would have with traditional media, and the speed of reacting to that and providing controlled messages, strategically controlled messages to appease that crowd is incredibly difficult. And I think they've done the best that they can in a world that is not governed by mainstream media.
The family's silence on Prince Andrew and the scandal involving the alleged Chinese spy, and over Prince Harry's ongoing court cases, shows that there is still a line on what they will and won't discuss. But it has been a year where the boundaries have, in some ways, significantly moved. We wait to see what 2025 has in store. Rhiannon Mills, Sky News.
So as the year draws to a close, let's get the latest sports news now with Joe.
Prime Minister Modi is the most popular politician in the country. He is expected to win his third term in these elections.
Jubilation in the streets, while some emotional.
This is a political victory for Prime Minister Modi and his Hindu Nationalist Party, a promise fulfilled. I'm Neville Lazarus and I'm Sky's reporter based in Delhi.
He paid over 50,000 to traffickers to get him to America. Instead, he was kidnapped, tied up and threatened by smugglers. A commando from the state force walks me through to a Maitai village on the front line.
Firing the civilian and they're burning our house.
We cross to the opposite side, held by the cookies.
When they fire, we have to retaliate.
Sky News, get the full story first. companies like these are helping India in its trajectory to be a serious player in space exploration.
The enthusiasm is palpable. The young desire change.
These elections are a pivotal moment for the country's economic and political history. The concern here is that the public healthcare system is inadequate.
In a prayer, she's asking God to help understand what happened. I cannot carry on. God, help me. He says his world has crashed. Like him, there are scores of families searching for their loved ones.
Too often have families endured such tragedies for the negligence not only by the administration, but also by spiritual people in this country. Free wherever you get your news. Even though it has few seats in Parliament, Kashmir is symbolic and very significant. It's often been called a nuclear flashpoint.
I'm James Matthews and I'm Sky's US correspondent, based here in Washington, D.C. Donald Trump, it would appear, is about to learn his fate. There's no doubting the strength of this hurricane as it roars through. Sky News, get the full story first. Do you fear a fourth indictment?
He's from Sky News. He's from Sky News. He's entitled to ask me questions.
There's always more to the news than a headline. We want to discover, to delve a little deeper, to find out what's really going on. Explanation, analysis, the people at the heart of every story. I'm Neil Patterson, and this is the Sky News Daily Podcast. So, by the end, we'll hopefully all understand what's going on in the world just that little better. Available wherever you get your podcasts.
We've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story. A new start to Sunday.
I'm ready. Are you?
Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
Welcome back. Let's get the sport.
This Sky News Sports Bulletin is brought to you by Vitality. Getting more people more active. Live life with Vitality.
I can remember standing in the paddock at the Victoria Ground. One of the coaches said, "You had an exceptional tournament there. People are starting to notice you now." And I came away from that evening, I was buzzing.
This is Rich Wilkinson, 16 years old, living the dream at Stoke City. Like so many others, he was released, but Rich took a different path. He trained as a therapist to counsel people with shared experiences.
Are you saying that for you back then, your entire status and feeling of self-worth was bound in with your football?
Absolutely. Everything was football. The confidence it gave me, self-esteem it gave me, this athletic identity. It starts from the moment that people around you are telling you you're good.
Explain to me a bit more about that athletic identity then.
It's almost like this false reality that you create for yourself. So if you imagine after deselection, when that's gone, that athletic identity doesn't serve in the real world anymore. This is where a lot of the problems come for deselected football players, because they're still trying to feed off that person.
I notice you use the phrase deselected footballers, not dropped footballers.
No.
That's
no.
presumably deliberate.
Absolutely deliberate, and I think it doesn't sit very well with rejection. I don't think it gives that player enough credit, if that makes sense. Let's be realistic here. You know, how many deselected players keep football clubs going? You know, without the deselected players, there is no football team. When I sat in therapy myself, one of the first things my therapist said to me was that you did okay. And I'd never thought that. I'd always treated it like a rejection.
Did you feel a failure when you were deselected?
So for me, the family bathroom in our home was the place where I did a lot of my decompressing, processing as a football player. I spent a lot of my time in that room mulling over my game, how I played, what I could do better, what I failed at, what I was listening to. It was a really poignant place for me. So when it came to me getting the news about whether I was going to be taken on with a contract or whether I was going to be deselected, I took the letter to that bathroom and locked the door. I looked at it and it was soul destroying. From that day on, I always told myself that I was okay, but I really wasn't. And it's sad when I look back on it now and I think about it, because I shut football down completely. I didn't watch it ever again. I didn't read about it. I just removed it.
How did you get from there to where you are now?
I was warned that if I go into this area and start looking at this, it could be too traumatic. I might not be able to do it. Because I'd got unresolved trauma, it was dangerous. I left the 17-year-old boy in the bathroom. I felt like I needed to go back in mentally to get in. And I worked with a fantastic counsellor who was able to support me in. What I was actually doing was I was telling myself that like my dream was over. It was the first time I'd done it for 20 years. So it was huge. I was so...
This Sky News Sports Bulletin is brought to you by Vitality.
I've got some breaking news for you. Sir Keir Starmer has just released his first New Year message as Prime Minister. Despite a landslide election victory in July, the Labour government has endured a difficult first few months in office, but the Prime Minister has been outlining his priorities for the coming year.
I know there's still so much more to do, and that for many people it's hard to think about the future when you spend all of your time fighting to get through the week. So I want to be clear, until you can look forward and believe in the promise and the prosperity of Britain again, then this government will fight for you. A fight for change that will define this year, next year, and indeed every waking hour of this government. We have a clear plan for change. 1.5 million new homes, restoring the dream of home ownership. Children starting school ready to learn. A more secure energy system. Waiting lists cut dramatically. Immigration reduced. Neighbourhood police tackling antisocial behaviour in every community. And more cash in your pocket wherever you live.
A part of the Prime Minister's New Year message there. Well, as this is the final News at 10 of 2024, we've been looking back at some of the Sky News top stories from the past 12 months. It's been a busy news year, of course, with elections in the UK and the US, wars impacting Europe, Africa and the Middle East, as well as the fall of the Assad regime in Syria. Here's a quick look at some of the biggest stories of 2024 in precisely 2 minutes, 24 seconds.
King Charles III has been diagnosed with cancer.
If you really want to defeat Putin, you have to stop being boring.
This is not a ban on TikTok.
Have you ever been a member of the Chinese Communist Party?
Senator, I'm Singaporean, no.
The test after the operation found cancer had been present.
It's been Baltimore's main bridge for nearly 50 years.
You just had to be here, right?
King Charles III has been diagnosed with cancer.
If you really want to defeat Putin, you have to stop being boring.
This is not a ban on TikTok.
Have you ever been a member of the Chinese Communist Party?
Senator, I'm Singaporean, no.
The test after the operation found cancer had been present.
It's been Baltimore's main bridge for nearly 50 years.
You just had to be here, right?
Like she's in Edinburgh.
Like I would kill for her.
I'm anxiety. Where can I put my stuff?
And it is heartbreak again. They have lost the Euros final to Spain.
We're English, we'll go again.
Andy Murray exited Wimbledon's centre court after his last match on British soil.
And 50 medal target has now been passed by Team GB.
There's been an incident in Southport.
The faces of 3 young girls who all went to dance and never came home.
Thousands of pages were remotely detonated across Lebanon and in Syria.
These are some of the last pictures of Ismail Haniyeh, the leader of Hamas's political operations.
The assassination of its figurehead, Hassan Nasrallah.
Yahya Sinwar was Israel's most wanted man. In a final attempt to survive, he throws a plank of wood at the Israeli military drone. It misses, and he was killed moments later. Israel's invasion of Gaza continues.
This is the aftermath of flash floods that swept across southeast Spain.
Take a look at what happened.
Biden has announced that he will not be contesting the next election.
They're the viral videos Kamala Harris hopes will help her to the White House.
An historic step for Elon Musk's SpaceX ambition for sustainable space exploration.
An unthinkable day for those who knew and loved Liam Payne.
The hunt for America's most wanted ended in shackle.
Best way to bring folks together is to get...
5.5 years after Notre Dame burned, a victorious resurrection.
People have come here to celebrate the fall of Bashar al-Assad.
So, time for the press preview. It's our first look at what is on the front pages. And over the next half an hour or so, we will check out those headlines with the political journalist and broadcaster Theo Usherwood and the Guardian columnist Zoe Williams. So let's take a look at what is on the front pages. The first front pages, of course, of 2025. Well, Express laments the 1.2% rise in the energy price cap from New Year's Day, which the paper says will leave people stripped of their winter fuel payment £500 worse off. That story also the front page lead in the Daily Mail, the headline, "So much for cutting our energy bills." The Mirror's been speaking exclusively to the Prime Minister, who promises to make 2025 special by honouring the sacrifices of World War II and building a Britain that those who gave their lives would be proud of. But according to tomorrow's Times, a new YouGov poll puts Labour behind the opposition on several issues, including their handling of the economy. Here's the Telegraph reporting that as VAT on private school fees comes into force in the morning, many will be also raising their fees by an average of 14%, which is more than the government predicted when it applied the VAT. The Guardian reports on an alarming rise in private dental costs. Apparently avoiding the NHS and having a tooth removed can now cost you more than £430. The Eye carries calls to ban engineered stone, a building material used in many modern kitchen worktops, which is believed to have polluted the lungs of many people. And finally, the boom-voiced actor Brian Blessed is on the front of the Star, explaining the strange story of why he had to punch a polar bear to save its life. So tempted to do my impression, but I'm not going to make you suffer that. And a reminder, by scanning the QR code you see on screen during the programme, just get out your mobile, scan that, and you can have a look at tomorrow's front pages while you watch us discussing them. And to do that, I'm joined by Theo Usherwood and Zoe Williams. Great to see you both. What's gone wrong that this is your best offer for New Year's Eve, spending it with me in a glass box?
I heard that you did an impression of a polar bear, and obviously I was right here.
Well, it's great to see you, but you brought champagne. I'm assuming it's just under the table or something. So yeah. We'll have a look for that in a bit. Great to see you both, and thank you for joining us this New Year's Eve. The papers, sadly, for the start of a new year, are all pretty gloomy, aren't they? All pretty miserable front pages. Let's start, shall we, with the Telegraph front page. Private schools to defy Treasury over fees. They're adding VAT, of course, 1st of January. Tomorrow is the date that bills will go up.
Well, all the predictions, all the government's projections relied on the schools kind of stomaching 10% of that rise. Obviously, it's a 20% rise if they had VAT. They assumed in the amount they thought it would cost parents that the schools would reduce their fees somewhat just to take account of it. Not a chance, basically. The kind of median is a 14% rise. So some of them are swallowing a small amount of it, but places like Eton are passing the whole lot on. What I think the Telegraph and indeed the wider media have misunderstood on this is just how sympathetic the nation as a whole is, either to the schools or the private school fee paying parents. It's very, very hard to get upset about the idea of people who send their kids to Eton getting a 20% fee increase rather than a 14 or a 10% one. It's just inconceivable that the money will make that much difference to them, or that they deserve the kind of sympathy and pity of the rest of the country.
Does the sympathy not come, though, with the concern that state schools will have many more pupils trying to go there because parents are taking them out of private schools or deciding not to go to private schools because they're becoming so expensive?
I mean, I think that's like a sort of category of who you're really talking about. These, you know, Eton, for example. Nobody sending their kids to Eton, where the fees are already so expensive, is thinking, OK, I'm going to now take the kids out and put a huge burden on state education. And furthermore, you know, state education was built to serve all the children of the country, and schools would be delighted to serve all the children of the community. Nobody's thinking, no teachers, no state school teachers are thinking, well, I don't want any of those posh ones. It's like, you know, they're built and designed to serve the children of the country, and they would.
Is this story not, Theo, more about those parents who are sort of struggling to send their kids to private school rather than the parents who go to Eton?
Exactly. You know, if you're Eton, what's the school fees must be circa £60,000 a year, I'd imagine. So another £12,000 on top is not going to bother those if you can afford £60,000 in the first place. It's those who are paying for smaller private independent schools and whether they can afford to stomach a 20% pay rise. And the inference, of course, is that if the Treasury had estimated that only 10% of school fees, that increase would be passed on, but actually it's 14%, that's going to have an impact on parents at the lower end of the scale who just choose private education and whether they can continue to do so. Now, I saw a separate analysis, which was something along, and this was what the government were monitoring, that around 3,000 pupils could drop out from, over the course of the rest of this academic year, could drop out of private education into state education. I accept Zoe's point. This is a broadly popular policy. That's what most people think. 94% of the population children attend state school. I don't think there are many violins out there for the parents of private school pupils who are now going to have increased fees. But from my point is that this policy has to work. We've got dilapidated schools. We've got a shortage of maths teachers, physics teachers. Our schools and education system needs investment, and you're not going to get that investment isn't going to count from this decision if you have large numbers of pupils dropping out of the private sector and falling into the state sector, and therefore increased class sizes as a result. And I'm slightly concerned when you look at the numbers and some of the projections that actually, yes, you can see the political rationale for it, but will it be effective? I'm not quite so sure.
I mean, I think the reason it's not sounding as effective as they originally thought it would be is that it doesn't really go far enough. The whole thing about private schools is their charitable status, and of which VAT is only one part. And I think the kind of framing of the debate ought really to be: are they charities if they only serve a very, very rich part of the community? Now, some of them, you know, would say, OK, we also do kind of joint ventures with our kind of neighbouring state schools. Many of them don't. No. And if they're not charities, then you need to look at it in the round and say, well, maybe they don't deserve the charitable status at all. Okay. Now, I know that sounds kind of radical, especially for New Year's.
Well, listen, we could talk more about that because it's a fascinating topic, but I want to move on to the front of the Daily Express. Temperatures, of course, plummeting. Winter fuel still on the agenda in 2025, Theo. Winter fuel pay victims suffer £500 bill rise, according to the £500 bill rise, according to the Express.
So, yes, I mean, they've gone in on, and this is a sort of revamp of a story we saw a couple of months ago when, of course, this is off the back of the previous increase in the price cap in October, 10%, now going up another 1.2%, and it could go up by a further £50 in April. And lumped together, the Express have come up with a sum that actually pensioners are going to pay an extra £500 on their energy bills. I think the broader concern has to be, of course, what this does for inflation in the economy. We saw the effect when we saw the prices of energy soar following Putin's invasion of Ukraine. Inflation is not coming down as fast as where it's actually gone up. Interest rates are remaining. Bank of England had been very keen on reducing interest rates. That doesn't look to be happening at any particular speed in going into 2025, and I think that's going to have a knock-on effect on the economy if we see, winter fuel, payments, energy costs are a big part of, making up inflation and inflation remaining high.
Really quick thoughts on this before we
The only thing I'd add to that, and this is a yes and, these figures by the Express are slight jiggery-pokery. They're adding the amount pensioners are losing by not having the winter fuel payments to the price cap rises. And the price cap rises have not risen by £500, and they aren't rising as fast as they did in the years where inflation really killed us. So I think, look, hats off to the campaigners. They're doing a really good campaign, but it's not always completely what it seems.
OK, interesting. All right. We've just heard from Sir Keir Starmer. He's given his New Year message. The Mirror says positive, arguably soft soap treatment of PM's New Year message. My promise for 2025, a year of rebuilding, he says, while also rediscovering the great nation that we are. What do you think, Zoe?
Well, that is the kind of softest and weakest and least meaningful bit of the speech, I think, is that, we honour the people who lost their lives in the Second World War. That could really have come from any Prime Minister at any point between now and Wilson, probably. And I guess I don't really understand why the Mirror splashed on it, because there was more substance in the speech.
The Times actually, and I'm sure we'll come on to it, has a bit more, the substance of the speech. Yeah. It says, for many people, it's hard to think about the future when you spend all your time fighting to get through the week. And I think this is going to be the tenet of Number 10's drive over the course of the next 12 months, is to recognise the difficulty that people are facing. But, Keir Starmer, going back to the liaison committee and what he says subsequently is absolutely adamant that he wants people to feel better off, working people to feel better off. And as a result, and if he can deliver that, and people do feel that they have more money in their back pocket, they have a bit more disposable income, and of course events will play a major part on whether that actually transpires or not, then the hope is that he'll be able to improve some fairly disastrous polling that we've seen since the general election, or slumps in the polls since we've seen the general election. Yeah,
the poll that you've referred to in the Times says only 31% of voters declare themselves optimistic about the year ahead, with 37% pessimistic. Just 40% of those who backed Labour last year are looking ahead with confidence, Zoe.
The thing is, there are a number of factors. Keir is not a lucky Prime Minister, right? He's had an amazing slew of bad luck, both the kind of personal bad luck. To lose his brother on Boxing Day is extraordinary when he's trying to build this kind of message of hope. And also, the bad luck of events. But also, he does have a huge amount of voices ranged against him. I haven't seen a single positive. There was no honeymoon period from the right-wing press whatsoever. They went straight in running on day one. And since it was, as we know it, the loveless landslide, the number of constituencies he won far outweighed the kind of number of people who really loved him. It's really a struggle to get any narrative across that isn't this kind of miserablism. And I think it is, heaven knows there have been disappointments from the left, but I do think a lot of this is really, really unfair.
Theo, give us something positive before we go to the break.
Look, let's start with something positive for the Conservatives, because according to this poll in the Times from YouGov, 24% now say they trust the Conservatives when it comes to the economy, compared to 21% for Labour. So there's a glimmer of hope there for
slightly
but it's hardly a resounding toll of confidence. I tried.
Plenty more still to come. We're going to take a look at why the cost of private dentistry is really starting to bite. I went to the dentist today. I'll tell you about that in a minute. Join us next.
I'm Stuart Ramsey, and I'm Sky's chief correspondent. Free wherever you get your news.
I'm Mark Stone, and I'm Sky's correspondent based here in Washington, D.C. Sky News, get the full story first.
I'm Katie Spencer, and I'm Sky News' arts and entertainment correspondent.
I'm Lisa Dowd, and I'm one of Sky's Midlands correspondents. The reason I do this job is because you never know where it's going to lead.
Welcome to the world.
Our new podcast, starting now. It's very exciting. Every week, we'll be reporting from the world's trouble spots.
We get to hold those in positions of power accountable, and we get to ask the questions that the audience, the listeners, want to know about.
And that's why it is so important that people tune in, come along for the road, come along for the journey. It'll be fun.
I'm Martin Brunt, and I'm Sky's crime correspondent. My most memorable story was, and still is, the disappearance of Madeleine McCann.
Please, please do not hurt her. Please give our little girl back.
We aim to be the best and most trusted place for news.
For detectives, the first 48 hours after a murder are crucial in the search for clues. The public expects them to find Jill Dando's killer soon.
I remember the grimmest case, the Soham murders of schoolgirls Holly and Jessica. I felt I can't undo what's happened, but I can help explain it.
Ian Huntley was arrested and charged within a fortnight of the murders.
My biggest challenge was to persuade a jailed diamond thief to answer my letters. Martin Brunt, Sky News, at the Old Bailey.
Our app gives you the very best of Sky News wherever you are. Breaking news, videos and analysis.
Evidence of the crisis.
Podcasts, watching us live.
Live here from Washington.
Wherever you get your podcast.
All in one place. And all at just the touch of a screen. The Sky News app. Get the full story first.
I'm James Matthews and I'm Sky's US correspondent, based here in Washington, D.C. Donald Trump, it would appear, is about to learn his fate. There's no doubting the strength of this hurricane as it roars through. Sky News, get the full story first. Do you fear a fourth indictment? Is it a draw?
He's from Sky News. He's from Sky News. He's entitled to ask me questions.
There's always more to the news than a headline. We want to discover, to delve a little deeper, to find out what's really going on. Explanation, analysis, the people at the heart of every story. I'm Neil Patterson, and this is the Sky News Daily Podcast. So, by the end, we'll hopefully all understand what's going on in the world just that little better. Available wherever you get your podcasts.
Welcome back to the press preview with me, Theo Ushwood and Zoe Williams. Zoe, The Guardian, Russia ending gas supply to Europe via Ukraine.
Basically, this is a deal is running out with Gazprom that's been in place for 5 years. So, you know, we've been used to huge energy price shocks ever since the invasion of Ukraine, but that hasn't actually, whatever the breaches and whatever the sanctions, this deal was still in place and it runs out at midnight. Everybody's talking about an 11th hour deal, but nobody seems to think that there's any likelihood of that happening. And yeah, I mean, I genuinely think this could be the destabilising thing. Europe needs to look even more unstable than it has done in 2024. It's very serious.
Yeah, an 11th hour deal, maybe not possible.
Yeah, and this is why Keir Starmer and Ed Miliband are trying to, work tirelessly to introduce onshore wind farms, renewable energy sources, so that we're not reliant on in this way. But whether that can make up the deficit, and we're going to see more if we see more instability. And of course, the timeframes are very different. It's a much longer-term project that Keir Starmer is embarking upon, and this is going to happen in the next few minutes. That is going to be problematic, and if this will have undoubtedly a knock-on effect on our own energy prices. I don't know whether I've seen we've just been talking about the energy price cap, and I don't know whether Cornwall Insights, which is the company, the organisation which looks very closely at energy prices, whether it's factored this particular, you would imagine so, but this particular development into it. But it's going to have significant impact, not just in this country, but of course in Western Europe as well.
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah,
sorry,
we want to go on to dentistry, right?
Yeah, exactly. Listen, I want to talk about dentistry. During the break, we were all talking about our dentist woes and the cost of it all. I went to the hygienist today and it costs sort of 80 quid just for a sort of 20-minute clean. It is expensive and it's going to get worse, according to The Guardian.
Well, essentially, the Guardian's just done some really basic data management of how much private treatment is costing, and actually, the average costs are going up by about 23%. It's extremely high, but it's, you know, when you compare other inflationary things over the past couple of years, it's not out of bounds. But what it means is that people, as one dentist describes, nobody can find an NHS dentist, so they're going private, and then they bounce out of the private system because they cannot afford £700 for a crown. Then they end up trying to get an NHS dentist, and all the while their oral health is deteriorating. As we all know, why did you go to the hygienist? Because we all know how much it can deteriorate if you don't look after it.
And then they say come back every 3 months.
I mean, it's I mean, I don't even want to call it a perfect storm. It's just a kind of woeful lack of provision.
But this shortage of dentistry, you know, stretches right across the board and has wider impacts than we might otherwise imagine. I mean, there was a story last week in the Times about a fifth of the armed forces not being ready to fight because they weren't deemed medically fit. And then James Heappey, the former armed forces minister, comes on and says, well, actually, they can none of our military can get, you know, it's probably down to dentistry appointments, and they haven't had their requisite appointment with a dentist within a 6-month period, and so basically they're struck through and said you're not fit to go onto the front line should the need arise. It's a real problem.
Is that true? They would actually.
Yeah. That's what he said in the interview.
It's incredible, isn't it?
They can't. You need to hit. You know, the army and the Ministry of Defence has a duty of care to provide the armed forces with the requisite medical appointments, and if they can't provide those appointments, then they can't put them on the front line.
Listen, we're just coming up to the top of the hour, and I want to just reflect on some of the celebrations that we've seen for New Year. Sydney always sparkles. I lived in Sydney. The display was amazing, but actually other places are now giving them a run for the money. Dubai was incredible. London, you spilt your water.
I was so excited.
Champagne, aren't you? Is it?
Well, wave the champagne.
Have you managed to watch any of the firework displays?
I mean, look, Sydney has to do what Sydney does, right? Because if they didn't really push the boat out, it would spell the end of fun for everybody, everywhere. But yeah, no, as you say, I think that there is a certain amount of time zone competitiveness. There's a certain amount of somebody has to.
Well, Zoe, we're going to go to Paris shortly. Join us for that.